Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
The story you're about to hear doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with a question that has echoed across deserts, scriptures, and centuries. What if one of the most sacred locations in human history has been misplaced? Not by accident, but by tradition. Imagine standing at the edge of a barren landscape, where the wind carries nothing but dust and silence. Yet beneath your feet lies something that could rewrite everything we think we know about faith, history, and civilization itself. This is not just another theory. It's a convergence of geography, technology, and ancient memory that is forcing historians, archaeologists, and believers alike to confront an uncomfortable possibility: that the story we've been told for over 1,000 years might be pointing to the wrong place. For generations, millions have made pilgrimages to a mountain in Egypt, convinced they are walking in the footsteps of Moses, retracing the path to where divine law was revealed. That belief is deeply rooted, reinforced by centuries of tradition, religious authority, and cultural repetition. It feels immovable, almost untouchable. But when you strip away tradition and examine the evidence itself, the foundation begins to crack. The descriptions preserved in ancient texts paint a picture that doesn't align with that familiar location. Not partially, not vaguely, completely. The mountain described in the ancient accounts was anything but ordinary. It was alive with fire, wrapped in smoke, trembling as if the earth itself could not contain what was happening above it. This was not a quiet, stable peak. It was a place of overwhelming force, and where heat altered the very structure of stone, and the atmosphere became thick with something far beyond natural explanation. Yet the mountain, long accepted as this sacred site, shows none of those characteristics. It is geologically calm, composed of granite untouched by extreme thermal transformation. No evidence of scorching, no signs of the kind of intense heat that would leave a permanent mark. It stands in quiet contradiction to the very story it is meant to represent. Now shift your attention eastward, beyond the familiar narrative, across the Gulf and into the rugged terrain of northwestern Arabia. Here, in a region long overlooked and tightly controlled, rises a mountain that has quietly held on to a different story. Locals have known it for generations, not as a mystery, but as something deeply significant. They didn't arrive at that belief through textbooks or institutional teachings. They inherited it, passed down through voices rather than pages, through memory rather than monuments. For decades, this mountain remained out of reach, restricted, guarded, and effectively erased from serious investigation. It existed in a kind of historical blind spot. Researchers who attempted to explore it were turned away. Access was denied. The narrative remained frozen, unchallenged, because no one could gather the kind of evidence needed to question it. But that changed when technology found a way where people could not. In 2025, a breakthrough occurred, not through excavation, but through observation from above. A specialized drone equipped with advanced ground-penetrating radar was deployed over this isolated peak. This wasn't ordinary imaging, as it was capable of revealing what lay hidden beneath layers of rock and time, mapping structures buried deep below the surface. What it uncovered was not random, not chaotic, and certainly not natural. Beneath the mountain, the scans revealed a network of shapes that defied geological explanation: rectangular chambers, straight zigzag corridors, organized layouts forming patterns that spoke of intention, not accident. Nature does not create symmetry with precision. It does not carve right angles into hidden spaces beneath a desert mountain. Yet there they were, clear, consistent, and impossible to dismiss as coincidence. The scale of what was detected only deepened the mystery. This wasn't a small cluster of cavities or a single hollow space. It was an extensive complex, stretching across an area large enough to hold thousands. The kind of space that aligns not with a single event, but with a gathering, something massive, something significant. The kind of description that echoes ancient accounts of a people assembled at the base of a mountain during a defining moment in their history. But the revelations didn't stop underground. When earlier reports and rare field observations were revisited, a pattern began to emerge on the surface as well. At the summit of this mountain, the rock appears blackened, not by age or mineral staining, but by exposure to extreme heat. This is not a subtle discoloration. It is a transformation, the kind that occurs when stone is subjected to temperatures high enough to alter its internal structure. Surrounding peaks remain untouched, their natural colors intact, making this one stand out like a scar in the landscape. Descending toward the base, another feature captures attention: a massive rock formation split cleanly into two halves. The separation is striking, not jagged or irregular, but almost precise. Around it, the ground bears signs of erosion caused by water flow, something that seems out of place in an environment defined by dryness. It suggests a sudden, powerful release, rather than a gradual process, a moment rather than an age. Nearby, remnants of what appears to be a constructed platform have been identified. Stones arranged with purpose, not scattered by chance. Evidence of burning has been found in the surrounding area, including traces consistent with ancient fires. These are not definitive conclusions on their own, but when viewed together, they begin to form a narrative, one that mirrors descriptions preserved for thousands of years. Even more compelling are the carvings etched into rocks in the region. Figures of cattle, scenes that appear to depict reverence or worship directed toward them. These are not random drawings. They reflect behavior, belief, and memory captured in stone. They hint at a moment when something went wrong, when devotion shifted, when a people created something to worship, in the absence of what they were waiting for. Encircling parts of the mountain are lines of stones, forming boundaries rather than barriers. They do not enclose or protect. They define a limit, a line that was not meant to be crossed. Their purpose isn't immediately obvious unless viewed through the lens of ancient instructions that warned against approaching too closely, against touching what was considered sacred. For years, our skeptics have pointed to the lack of physical evidence supporting the events described in these ancient narratives. They asked where the remnants were, where the artifacts had gone, why nothing obvious remained. But this expectation may have been based on a misunderstanding. A temporary encampment, especially one composed of tents and minimal permanent structures, would leave very little behind. Time, weather, and movement would erase most traces, especially in a harsh desert environment. What if the evidence was never missing, just hidden, buried beneath layers of sand, rock, and centuries of natural change? The radar findings suggest exactly that. Not absence, but concealment. Not loss, but preservation beneath the surface, waiting for the right tools to reveal it. There is also the question of silence from ancient powers, particularly Egypt. If such a dramatic event occurred, why was it not recorded? The answer may lie not in whether it happened, but in how history was documented. Ancient rulers did not preserve accounts of failure or humiliation. They curated their legacy, celebrating victories and erasing defeats. Evidence from other periods shows that inconvenient truths were often deliberately removed, names chiseled away, records destroyed. So silence does not necessarily mean absence. It may mean suppression. And then there is the deeper, more controversial possibility, one that moves beyond archaeology into speculation. If structures exist beneath this mountain, what were they for? Storage, shelter, protection. Some have suggested that something of immense significance could have been placed there, hidden intentionally, sealed away for preservation. It's a theory that cannot be proven with current data, but it lingers because of the questions that remain unanswered. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of all is the idea that this mountain was never just important because of a single event. There are indications that it was already considered sacred before the most well-known story associated with it ever took place, that its significance predates the narrative, suggesting continuity rather than coincidence. A place recognized, remembered, and revered long before it entered written history. The people who lived in its shadow did not need rediscovery. They already knew. Their understanding was not built on institutional authority, but on generational memory. While distant scholars debated and theorized, and those closest to the land preserved a different kind of knowledge, one that is now being revisited with new respect. And so we arrive at a moment where technology, tradition, and testimony intersect, where a mountain once hidden behind restriction is beginning to reveal its secrets, where questions once dismissed are now being asked again, this time with data to support them. But the most important question isn't just what lies beneath that mountain. It's what happens if those discoveries are confirmed. Because this isn't just about relocating a historical site. It's about challenging narratives that have stood unexamined for centuries. It's about the possibility that memory, even when dismissed, can endure long enough to be proven right. The mountain has not given all its answers. Not yet. And it has only offered a glimpse, an outline of something deeper, something deliberate. And perhaps that is where the real tension lies, not in what we've found, but in what we might find next. Because once the silence is broken completely, there is no going back to what we thought we knew.